This is the Louie T Network. Hey, either you're outside or you're
in the lab room.
Hey, yo, who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome. You are in the lab room. Of course, I am your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. This is the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where I aim to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2015 NFL Draft. Look at each and every selection made by said team. Get a score for each pick using our baseball grading scale: single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series, as I cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we get an aggregate score by tallying up all the individual scores, adding them up, dividing by the number of selections, applying bonuses when necessary, and voila, we come up with a final grade for that team's draft. Move on to the next team in the process, picked by you. That's right, you, the viewers, are in total control over who is next in the series by simply being the first to leave a post in the comment section stating two things: the team you'd like to see next and the phrase next itself. So next, N-E-X-T, and the team you'd like to see next in the process. That's all that has to be in the comment, and you gotta be first on this video and future videos that I will be uploading in this series. So with all the particulars out of the way, the next team up in the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series that you, the viewers, have selected is none other than the San Francisco 49ers. And to say they had a rough offseason would be an understatement. This is a team that has seen so much turnover this offseason that we don't even know the team we're looking at, okay? I look at the 49ers and I say, who are you? No, seriously, who are you? I don't know those guys. I don't know you. I don't know a 49ers team without Patrick Willis in the middle, without Justin Smith on the defensive line, without Jim Harbaugh and his khaki pants trolling the sidelines. I don't know these dudes, man. Who are you? No, seriously, who are you? And so this offseason is going to be very telling. We lump the 49ers in consistently with the upper echelon teams of the league, and rightfully so. 49ers have been one of the most consistent outfits the last 5 to 7 years, and so they have earned the right to be among the elite in the NFL, but last year was rough. A lot of will he go, won't he go? It's only a matter of time before Jim Harbaugh is out, and he is now in Michigan. And so new head coach Jim Tomsula, a lot of rifts up in the front office with Jim Harbaugh and the way he was doing things. Some guys didn't really appreciate the way he was going about his business in San Francisco. That made the front office look like they were the ones that caused this rift, that they were the problems and not Jim Harbaugh. And so now they really have some explaining to do. You got some explaining to do. And if you're in the front office, this is a big time offseason for you, because it's one thing when you're the Baltimore Ravens. You know the mantra, you know the motto, in Ozzie we trust. You know that year when they won the Super Bowl and they had all that turnover, Ray Lewis retires, Matt Burke retires, they lose Anquan Bolden, they trade him away, and it looked really bleak. No more Ed Reed. It was bad that offseason for the Ravens. But the one glimmer of hope in Baltimore is that we got Ozzie Newsome pulling the strings. I thought it was going to take them at least 3 years to get back to the postseason. They missed 1 year of postseason football. Ozzie had a draft where he went out and got a player like C.J. Mosley, turned things around. They were back in the postseason the very next year. So the question is, 49ers missed the postseason last year for the first time in a while. Didn't have the best of seasons. Now it's up to you. Talking to Trent Baalke here, okay? Talking to Trent Baalke this is your mess. You and some of the other guys in the front office, this is your mess. You have to clean it up. Now, can you do what Ozzie Newsome did in Baltimore? Have an outstanding draft, turn around quickly what seemed to be a long-term project, and turn this back into a respectable outfit. Going to need to do that through the draft, which has always been a staple of a Trent Baalke draft, loading up for the future. Are you in a position? That's the question I ask 49ers fans. Are you still in the same position that you were in over the last 3 or 4 years where you can draft and stash players, where you've got the liberty to do some things other teams can't even dream of doing because A, you don't have the surplus of talent anymore. I mean, you had Patrick Willis retire, Justin Smith retire, and you had, and this caused a lot of controversy around the league. It had Borland, Chris Borland retire as well at a very ripe young age. And so you look at Dan Scooter gone in free agency, Jacksonville Jaguars. Ray McDonald couldn't get his act together off the field. He's now gone. It's a lot of change on this 49ers team. Okay, a lot of players that were here a season ago, no longer here, Frank Gore included. And so this is a big offseason for the 49ers. Can Trent Baalke and his staff put together another gem of a draft and put the 49ers back on the fast track to the postseason? We shall see. Let's delve into the San Francisco 49ers 2015 NFL Draft. Starting the first round. 17th overall selection, defensive lineman out of Oregon, Arik Armstead is the selection. This was a pick that the 49ers got from the Chargers. They traded back 2 slots from 15 to 17, picked up some picks later on in the draft to allow the Chargers to go up and get Melvin Gordon III, and the 49ers moved back and picked Arik Armstead. Not going to break this player down as I've already done that in my Draft Prospects 101 series. If you're looking for a thorough breakdown of Arik Armstead and many others who were thought to be highly sought after prospects in the 2015 NFL Draft, look at the 2015 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series. But I will say this is a guy that is highly talented, but he is a potential bust. Now, that really goes without saying for any player that you draft. You got some guys that you feel like are absolute home runs, like an Andrew Luck a few years ago, like C.J. Mosley last year. And I wasn't a C.J. Mosley guy, but I was quickly converted. I mean, C.J. Mosley made a believer out of me. And so there are guys that you see that are just can't miss prospects. Arik Armstead isn't one of them, but he's got a tremendous ceiling on him, and that's why he's a first-round pick. But if you watched already, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but if you've already watched my Draft Prospects 101 breakdown of Arik Armstead, I clearly stated in that breakdown that I would not have spent a first-round pick on this guy. To me, he's got first-round talent, but you have not seen enough of it at Oregon to feel comfortable. Now, this is strictly a potential pick here. You're going off of what you have this guy building into down the road. You have this guy right now at what, 6'7", 6'8"? And you see this guy as a huge ball of potential, and you feel like you're going to tap not only into some of that potential, but all of it, and he's going to manifest himself into a first-round pick. I don't like relying on guys that haven't shown me enough on tape to make me feel comfortable with their first-round status. That's the case with Arik Armstead. So I'll say this much. Guys got all the talent in the world. You lose Justin Smith, you need a force along that defensive line. It makes plenty of sense. However, I'm not comfortable selecting a guy in the first round that I didn't see first round flashes from on a consistent basis with the numbers to back it up in the first round. And so there you have it. I said my piece. This guy's a talented football player and very well may turn out to be a gem in the National Football League. But for right now, in the first round, 17th overall selection, defensive lineman out of Oregon, Arik Armstead for me is a triple. The pick itself, trading back, getting more picks, moving back 2 slots. This is a really good pickup for the 49ers in terms of that, but I'm looking at the player. I coupled in a little bit of that pick and trading back and getting more picks. Still not comfortable with Eric Armstead, and I said that before and I'll say it again, as a first round pick, and so that's why this is a triple for me in the first round. We move on to the second round. Pick number 46 overall, defensive back out of Samford. No, not Stanford, Samford. Jaquiski Tartt is the selection, and here's a guy that started to build a lot of steam late in the draft process. For those who had been watching tape on this guy from the jump, they already knew what this guy brought to the table and felt good about him. For a lot of others, like myself, his name really started to surface as we got deeper and deeper into the draft process, closer and closer to the draft itself. This guy's name started to surface a lot more, and here's why. Pros, size, 6'1", 221 pound safety, and this is a safety, and you look around and some people that aren't in the know say, well, didn't the 49ers draft a safety last year in the first round? You would be correct if Jimmy Ward was actually a safety. Jimmy Ward was drafted to be a hybrid of sorts, a safety that can play corner, and they had visions of this guy kind of being an interchangeable piece. They thought he could be what Earl Thomas was, or is, I should say, for the Seattle Seahawks. And they got him, and then they said, you know what, you're more of a corner. You're more of a guy that we can just put over the slot and feel good about that. Don't necessarily know if you're a guy we want playing as a safety. You go out, you get Antoine Bethea. He shows you he's got a lot of good football left in him. You've got Eric Reed back there. Really no need to put Jimmy Ward back there right now. And so what the 49ers said is, I don't really know if we got a safety on our hands. He's more of a corner, which is fine. You can never have enough corners, right? So they said, let's double dip. Let's go back and do what we should have done a season ago and get an actual true safety. Because Antoine Bethea, like I said, showed that he has some good football left in him, but he's still on the wrong side of 30. So you need to prepare yourself for the future there. And if I'm not mistaken, Eric Reed has already had a few concussions, hasn't even been in the league that long. And this goes back to his LSU days. He's a guy that has been concussed a few times. Gotta watch out for guys like that because their careers could end very abruptly. So can never have enough insurance if you are the 49ers, and that's where a guy like Jaquiski Tartt comes into play. 6'1", 221 is excellent size for the safety position. I can't stress that enough. I love bigger safeties that have range, that can run, that can hit, do all of those things. Jaquiski Tartt fits right into that mold. 4'5", flat 40. So we're talking about an athlete. That's the next pro. This is a guy that I feel like has the ability to range around the field. That's another pro. I'm going to lump these two together. Really good range for his position. Now, I don't think he's a single high safety, and that's basically what he was asked to do at Samford. He was the single high safety. He had a lot of responsibility. He had to patrol the entire back half. I don't think that's something you want out of Jaquiski Tartt. And I'll talk about why a little bit later on, but to me, he has good enough range to be a half of the field safety, a cover 3 safety, a cover 2 safety. I don't want this guy as a single high safety, but he can get to the football from a single half of the field and get to the boundary, can range backwards and run 45 yards down the field with a receiver. I feel very comfortable with his range, and his athleticism shows on tape, and that 4.5 40 speed is very present on tape as well. Extremely aggressive, and I think that's the thing that had the 49ers and other teams around the league buzzing about this guy, is his aggressiveness. He's a very physical safety in nature, and he's aggressive. He's looking to come down, and he's coming down with a lot of physicality, a lot of thunder, looking to drop the hammer on a ball carrier. Not always going to wrap up and make it look pretty and put a nice bow on top, but he's going to get guys on the ground. He's going to hit you. You're going to know you just got hit by Jaquiski Tartt. He's a physical football player, extremely aggressive. You know what happens to extremely aggressive football players. I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but take none of that for granted. This is a guy that is a football player and is going to be around the football because he is aggressive. Tough and physical. Okay, I just talked about his physicality. So I want to go to the toughness aspect a little bit and elaborate on that. I watched at least 3 tapes on this guy. I watched him against Auburn. I watched him against Arkansas. I watched him against Chattanooga. And in every single one of those games, at some point, Jaquiski Tartt came off the field with some type of injury. Now, you can translate that any way you want. He's injury prone. He came back in every single one of those games and finished the game. So you can spin it any way you want. I'm choosing to take a look at the tough angle because a guy can limp off the field, a guy can get helped off the field and not return. This guy came back and was the best player on the field just about every single time, with the exception of the Auburn game. I thought he was still the best player on the field in that Arkansas game when he came back on the field and he was playing and running around and making some plays for his football team. So to me, Jaquiski Tartt is a tough individual, and when you're extremely aggressive like this guy is, and you're physical and you throw your body around the way that he does, you're going to come up with some injuries. Got to be able to be tough and come back from those injuries. And that's what he did time and time again on the tape. He tackles. And to me, that's the biggest part of being a safety. Look, I want you to be athletic. I want you to be able to run around. I want you to beat Earl Thomas. But Earl Thomas tackles. You got to be able to tackle as a safety. You are the last line of defense. Not always going to be the last guy back there now. A lot of safeties, and again, I talk about being interchangeable in this day and age in the NFL. As a safety, there's really no more distinctions between free and strong safety. Yeah, you're going to have some guys that are more physical, that aren't as good out in space, and you want them around the line of scrimmage, and so we designate them strong safeties. Sure, but in this day and age, you need to be interchangeable. You need to be able to play 35, 40 yards away from the line of scrimmage, and you also need to come up within 7 to 10 yards of the line of scrimmage and drop the hammer as well. So really, that kind of goes by the wayside. However, you also need to be able to be 25 yards off the football. It's a running play. You're deep. You come up, you're the last line of defense, and you're able to come up and make a form tackle. Jaquiski Tartt can do exactly that. He is a guy that gets ball carriers on the ground. He tackles. That is a big plus for him in that department. You go to his cons. He's over-aggressive. I talked about him being extremely aggressive early on. He's a physical football player, so it isn't a surprise to tell you that he's over-aggressive, and teams will take advantage of his over-aggressiveness. You turn on the Chattanooga tape, I saw a guy, and let's talk about why he's over-aggressive. His first step is generally towards the line of scrimmage. And yes, that's fine if it's a run play because you want him coming up in run support. However, what happens if it's a pass? And that's the problem I have with Jaquiski Tartt is he's over-aggressive. He's looking to come up, first step, maybe even 2, towards the line of scrimmage. It's a pass. All of a sudden now, he's taking some false steps. Receivers coming up, and he's already by Jaquiski Tartt. A couple of times he took some poor angles to the football, allowed receivers to get behind him. On other occasions, he just flat out was wrong and wrongly diagnosed plays, thought it was a run, took some false steps up, running back, tight end, whomever, able to sneak by him in coverage and able to get some big yardage out of the plays. And so he's a guy that can be over-aggressive, and you can and teams will use that over-aggressiveness against him. He's got to clean that up and be a little bit more sound in his principles. He's nosy. I discipline guy. He's looking at the quarterback to try to get a key, and that's what good safeties do. The great ones have the ability to look at the quarterback, read their eyes, and that's why they teach quarterbacks nowadays to manipulate safeties with their eyes. You want to go back this way, your job is to stare this way, take the safety from the middle of the field over to that hash, and then go back over that way with the football. He's one of those guys that reads the eyes of the quarterback, and if the quarterback takes him to the football, he'll make a play on the football. If the quarterback is deceiving him, he's going to get got, and he's a guy that has very poor eye discipline at times. He's extremely nosy, but again, that's what you get out of aggressive safeties. They're going to be nosy. They're going to overcommit at times. That's just something you're going to have to live with. You're just going to have to try to clean it up as best you can, because if you neuter guys like him and take away his aggressiveness, you take away what makes him the football player that he is. So you just got to try to reel him in a bit, get him to scale back on some of that aggressiveness, but don't fully take away what makes him a second-round pick in this draft. And finally, his health. I didn't mention that he was a tough guy. Tough guy, gonna make big bucks? Digga, man! You kidding me or what, man? But what if He's a guy that just gets injured all the time. That's a problem for me. Now, I said he came back in all those games, and it's not uncommon for a guy to tweak an ankle early in the season and never really have that ankle fully healed. It's not uncommon for a football player to have a nagging injury all year long, and that could have been the case with Jaquiski Tartt. Looked like that ankle was heavily taped, and I saw him limping off the field game after game after game. That could have easily been the reason why he continued to get hurt, but I'm not sure about that. All I know is I watched 3 tapes, and all 3 of them saw him leave the field at some point or another in that game, only to return. Is he injury prone? Is he tough? You make the call. I just know I saw a guy getting injured quite a bit. Hopefully he's able to shed that and stay healthy for this 49ers team. In the second round, 46th overall selection, defensive back out of Samford. Jaquiski Tartt for me is a triple. I think he brings a lot more value than your first round pick last year in Jimmy Ward. I thought Jimmy Ward was a second round pick, and I thought he went off the board just because of sheer necessity. If they didn't get him then, some other team would have gotten him before the 49ers were able to, so they had to take him at that time. They could not wait. Jaquiski Tartt to me is an actual safety that's going to give you value at that position. In this day and age, you got to be able to put 4 or 5 defensive backs on the field. And really, second and third down situations, second down is a passing down for most teams. First down has even turned into a passing down for some teams. Got to be able to have a physical safety in that NFC West with the Seahawks and the St. Louis Rams. Physical football teams. Cardinals not as physical from an offensive standpoint like those other 2 teams that I just mentioned are, but still, they're a physical team in that division in their own right. That's a physical division. This is a physical safety. This guy fits the DNA of what the NFC West is all about. Go to the third round, 79th overall selection, outside linebacker out of Virginia. Eli Harold is the selection. I've broken him down already in the Draft Prospects 101 series, so again, not going to break him down here. I will say this much, I think this is right around where he should have been drafted. I thought that because of teams in desperate need for edge rushing help, was going to really elevate his stock and have this guy drafted a lot sooner than he was supposed to be. Because when I watch the tape, I see a guy with elite athleticism, but I don't see much else. He doesn't have a full arsenal of moves that would require a team to have to go up and get this guy in, say, the second round and say the late stages of the first. I think he's a guy that still needs some development, and this is a good spot for him because he doesn't have to play right now. You look at what the 49ers have at the outside linebacker position. As disgruntled as he was a season ago, Ahmad Brooks still there. I thought, and I said last year on this very program, that I thought Aaron Lynch was going to be a hell of a football player. He turns out to be a gem for you last year. He's going to see the field a lot more this year. You still got Aldon Smith. We forget about him so much because he has played so little the last 2 years that you can forget easily that they still have a guy like Aldon Smith, but he's a terror when he's on the field. And so he doesn't have to come in right away and start and give you meaningful snaps right off the bat. Much like you did with Aldon Smith some years ago, this guy can be a third down specialist, come in the game when you're trying to get as many pass rushers on the field as possible and see if he can't wreak havoc that way. This is a guy that needs some schooling, some grooming. Over time, I think he'll be a really good football player, but right now, he's not ready yet. And so in the third round, 79th overall selection, outside linebacker out of Virginia, Eli Harold for me is another triple. I think this guy has a lot of tools in his bag, just needs some development and some honing in on his craft and his skill so that he can get better. But you can't teach raw athleticism and ability. This guy has that. Looking forward to seeing if they can't get the most out of Eli Harold in San Francisco. You go on to the fourth round, 117th overall selection, tight end out of Oklahoma. Blake Bell is the selection. This is a pick garnered from that deal with San Diego to move back 2 picks. So again, 49ers really getting the most out of this draft. And this is where you do your damage. To me, the meat and potatoes of any draft in the NFL happens from rounds 3 to about 5. 49ers have 3 fourth round selections. That's how you build your football team and stay relevant in this league, with having that many middle of the draft selections. Let's start with the first of those 3 fourth round selections. Blake Bell to me is a very intriguing prospect. Let's talk about why I feel like this is a guy, much like Eli Harold, who's not ready yet, but in time could prove to have huge dividends for this 49ers team. Great size at 6'6", 252 pounds. That is an NFL tight end body, if I can really say so myself. That is a tremendous size for that position. Gives you an automatic target in the red zone. 6'6" is great size at the tight end position, not to mention 252 pounds. He competes as a blocker. Now let me explain a little bit of who Blake Bell is as a football player, first and foremost. And I'm gonna lump this next pro in here because this has a lot to do with his background and his story. He's an ex-quarterback, okay? For those of you who follows college football, you know who this guy is. I don't have to explain to you who Blake Bell, aka the Belldozer, is. But for those of you who do not follow the college game, let me school you on who this guy is. Highly touted prospect at Oklahoma. Played 3 years as a quarterback for the Oklahoma Sooners. The last two were big years for him, where he was the star. He was a Tim Tebow dual threat type of quarterback. Not really known for his passing game as much as he was his legs and his ability at 6'6", probably a little bit less pounds back then, probably more like 235 pounds than 250 where he is now, but still, that's a load to bring down. And he was a guy that would bulldoze his way into the end zone, hence the nickname Belldozer. And so this was a guy that was a handful as a dual threat quarterback. But Oklahoma found some success with Trevor Knight, especially last year in that bowl game against Alabama, where they were able to come away victorious. And that made the coaching staff take another look and say, you know what? We probably should go with Trevor Knight as our starter. He gives us the best chance to win, gives us a legit passing game to go along with all the other things that we can do on the offensive side of the football. Hence, Samaje Perine. Don't tell anybody I just told you about that guy. But Blake Bell goes into the offensive coordinator's office and says, hey man, look, I know I'm not starting at quarterback anymore, but I want to be a part of this team. I want to help. I want to play tight end. And they looked at him and they said, are you sure that's what you want to do? He said, yeah, I want to help this team in any way that I can. That takes us to our next pro. He's selfless. He's selfless. He's a team-first guy. You need players like this in your locker room. If there's anything that you want out of guys that are going to be in the 4th and 5th rounds, it's high character, okay? These are the guys that are the foundation and building blocks of your football team. They don't get a lot of the accolades when things go well. They don't get a lot of the blame, but they're the meat and potatoes of your roster. You want selfless football players in your locker room that put the team ahead of themselves. Blake Bell did that when he went to the offensive coordinator. Didn't pout, didn't complain about being benched. Said, hey, I want to help. Put me at tight end. Put me in the game, coach. I'm ready. And so he competes as a blocker. That's his story. Okay, a guy that in his senior season, never having played tight end before, makes the switch from quarterback to tight end and was out there starting in a very big role for the Oklahoma Sooners at the tight end position. And I thought he competed as a blocker. I thought he went out there, he stood his ground at the point of attack, didn't always win, but he was out there putting a hat on a hat and getting the job done. Oklahoma had one of the best rushing attacks in all of football, and he was a large part of the reason why they moved him around. He was at H-back, he was at fullback, he was at tight end, he was split out wide, he was everywhere. He was a big reason why they were able to run the football with such success in 2014. He has solid hands for a guy that hasn't played the tight end position before and wasn't used to what he was being asked to do. He's a guy that I think in the future can develop into a pass-catching threat on the offensive side of the football. Right now, to me, they asked him primarily at Oklahoma to just block. They threw him a bone every now and again, but for the most part, his job was to block. I believe he only had 10 catches on the season, so don't look for this guy to be an impact player right away as a pass catcher. He's very raw in that sense, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but this guy can catch the football. I was watching the game against Oklahoma State, and then he runs an out route, high pass, backup quarterback in the game. He was garbage. balls high, and really Blake Bell open for a good 8-10 yard completion. Probably gonna be incomplete. He stretches out that 6'6" frame, stops the football with one hand, brings it in one hand, grab. The guy can catch the football. So there is some hope in the future for this guy to develop as a complete tight end and not just a blocking threat. He's got upside. That's the final pro. I just told you that this guy is extremely raw at the tight end position, which means there's plenty of room for improvement as a tight end. And I think that he did himself a huge favor by asking to become a tight end, because I don't think he was a draftable quarterback. Even if he would have played his senior season at Oklahoma, he would not have been drafted because he was not good enough as a passer of the football. And so to move to tight end and make yourself valuable enough to be a 4th round selection, to me, is a huge testament to how good this guy could be at the next level with some work at the tight end position. You go to his cons. I've already stated this. Going to talk about it in depth now. He is extremely raw, and you see it on film. There are a lot of things that he just doesn't know how to do yet because he's so wet behind the ears, breath smelling like Similac at the tight end position. We're talking about a guy that runs routes like a robot. He's very robotic with his movement skills. And when you see guys functioning like a robot, a lot of times they're thinking too much. And when you think a lot, it's generally because you don't know, okay? When a guy knows what he's doing, he doesn't have to think. It's muscle memory. It comes to him in his sleep. You don't have to think about it. You just get out in the field and you do it. You execute. But when a guy's out there being robotic, it's because he's thinking too much. He's trying to figure out, what's my job? What am I supposed to do on this play? What's my responsibility? When you're thinking, you don't react fast enough a lot of times, and you could see that on the field, especially when he was running routes. He doesn't understand sitting down in zones and things of that nature as a tight end. Now again, as an ex-quarterback, and that's why I was one of his pros, he understands what a tight end's job is and how they're supposed to sit down, man versus zone, and he understands. But as a tight end, it's a little different because you got to read the defense on the fly. As a quarterback, you drop back in the pocket, and maybe you've already read pre-snap that it's zone versus man. You should be able to, but even if you haven't, by the time that back foot hits the ground, you should have already identified zone or man coverage. If that tight end has an option route, you understand what he's doing on the play. As a tight end, however, okay, now you're actually diagnosing the defense on the move. You've got to figure out man versus zone while you're running your route and really adjust your route accordingly. Harder to do when you're not adept at that position. And so you're asking Blake Bell to do a lot of things that are foreign to him and he's not accustomed to doing. His blocking angles could use some work. There's some times where he commits to one side or the other, allows a lane for a defender to get up the field and make some plays and get into some plays. These are all things he'll get better at with time. To me, he's physical enough to play the position. He understands the things that he needs to do. He's strong enough. He's big enough. I talked about him being 6'6", 252 pounds. This guy's got everything you're looking for. And I think he'll be all right with a little bit of schooling, a little bit of training, a little bit of them working with him and teaching him. This 49ers team is loaded at the tight end position. You still got Vernon Davis. You still got Vance McDonald. Brent Selleck right now is your current blocking tight end. This guy's going to probably take his place on the roster. He's got time to learn. There's no rush here for Blake Bell. That's why it's a solid selection. He's an average athlete. That's his last con, is that he's a 4.8 40 guy. He's a 4'8" guy. So he's not going to blow by anybody. He's not going to wow you with that. But his size alone makes up for the 4'8", 40. And I actually feel like he moves a little faster than that on game days. I mean, you see him catch that pass against Oklahoma State down the seam, and it takes him another 15 yards to catch him after he catches the football. This guy's got a little bit of movement skills on him. I wouldn't be surprised if his game day speed is more close to 4'7" than 4'8". So this is a guy that I really like, and I think this is a good selection for the 49ers in the 4th round, 117th overall selection. Tight end out of Oklahoma, Blake Bell for me is a double. A lot of work here to be done with this guy. Extremely raw at the position, but the upside here is worth taking this guy in the 4th round and seeing if you can't develop him into a top tier tight end in the National Football League. I think when it's all said and done, if you do your job, this guy's got enough skills to turn into a balanced tight end that can block and still hurt you in the passing game as well. You go to the next 4th round selection, 126th overall, running back out of South Carolina, Mike Davis is the pick. His pros, he runs behind his pads, okay? His pad level is low, and he's got a low center of gravity, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but he runs behind his pads. Does that sound familiar to you? A guy that by the number of 21 in San Francisco? Yeah, he's gone, but not forgotten. Frank Gore, of course, the inconvenient truth, used to run really well behind his pads. Another smaller guy that could get lost in the shuffle. Mike Davis looking to come in, and I think that's exactly why the 49ers drafted this guy. They see a little bit of Frank Gore in Mike Davis. Comparable size, similar rushing styles. This is a guy that the 49ers have a lot of hopes for, and you got a couple of running backs already in place that are injury prone. And so you feel like this is a guy that can come in and be a stabilizing force just in case the guys you already have in-house turn out to get injured on you. You want to have guys that can step up and really pick up the slack. And so he squares his shoulders to the line of scrimmage. Not often you're going to see Mike Davis get hit and go backwards or get tackled for a loss going sideways. He's a guy that usually squares his shoulders to the line of scrimmage, gets north and south, and gets what's there. He's a physical runner too, and I think he didn't get enough credit for that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. You go to his next pro, however, he has a burst. Now this isn't a guy that's going to wow you with his speed, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on as well, but he has a burst, and you put on any tape you want, the Kentucky tape, the Georgia tape, you name a tape, he shows you that burst at some point. Missouri, you give him the football out of space, he gets a full head of steam, 4 or 5 steps. He's not a guy that's going to get from 0 to 60 in 2 steps, like that. But you give this guy a running head start, give him 4 or 5 steps, all of a sudden he's one of these guys that's hard to get on the ground because you're finding it harder, increasingly harder, to catch up with him. Once he gets going and gets lathered up, there's a burst there, he turns it up and gets into another gear. Now again, he does not sustain that for a long enough period to be a home run hitter. But this is a guy that will hit some triples, hit some doubles, and he's definitely going to hit a bunch of singles on you. So this is a guy that you want to get your hands on, because if he gets to take a few steps and gets into his full out stride, this is a guy with a burst, and you'll see that in the upcoming months with Mike Davis. He can catch the football. Now, they didn't throw it to him a bunch at South Carolina. That wasn't his niche. He didn't carve out a niche where he was a 3rd down back at South Carolina, but he did catch the football when they threw it to him. I feel comfortable saying this. I think he has natural hands and natural catching ability, and I think he's a guy that if you have to dump it down to, if Cap's dropping back on 1st and 10, and this guy's in on the first play of a series, and Cap's looking for a check down option, Mike Davis 5 yards up the field, dump it down to him, he'll catch it. You want to split this guy out, send him in motion, try to win a one-on-one matchup with a linebacker, and you run him an arrow route right across the field. I think he'll catch it in stride and keep on running. I think he has natural pass catching ability, and I already said this before and I'll say it again. I thought this crop of running backs in this year's draft had some of the best hands of any running back class I've seen in a while. So that tells you a lot, and he was part of the guys that were at the combine catching the football like crazy. I think this guy has really good hands. He can catch the football. He runs with power, and I talked about this earlier. I alluded to the fact that I felt like this is a guy that doesn't get enough credit for the amount of power that he runs with, but he's a low center of gravity guy, and I told you he runs behind his pads. He will lower his shoulder and get extra yardage. Most times than not, he's going to lean forward and get the extra yardage that's there. He runs with some power, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that as a running back. Low center of gravity, and I've already mentioned that same phrase about 3 or 4 times when mentioning Mike Davis. 5'9", 217-pound back. Again, reminds you a lot of Frank Gore. Frank Gore, smaller back, compact, but I don't think Frank was as big, Now, you know what? Frank was a bigger guy too. So his 5'9", 217-pound frame looks a little bit bigger though. He looks a lot stockier, solid, more like a Maurice Jones-Drew type size. Again, Maurice Jones-Drew was a lot shorter, or at least he seemed a lot more compact than a Mike Davis, but his stature is a lot like his, more so than it is Frank Gore. However, Frank was a lot faster than him. Frank could hit home runs. This guy is not going to hit home runs for you. And we'll discuss that here in a second when we get to his cons. But this is a guy that I feel like his low center of gravity allows him to get down behind those pads, like I mentioned earlier, drive forward, get the yards that are there. He's also able to disappear behind the line, sort of like how Frank used to do in San Francisco, weave in and out of cuts and blocks, and come out the other side of the hole and explode and pick up yardage. This is a guy in Mike Davis that can do the exact same thing. Lower center of gravity means you're not getting a lot of shots on this guy, clean shots that send him flying backwards, which is what I already talked about earlier, and he's not putting the football on the ground as much either. When you have a lower center of gravity, you're less likely to fumble the football than the upright guys. I like my tall backs. However, if you don't have a good pad level and are able to drive your feet forward and keep the ball low, tight, and away, then you're going to, and really it's high and tight, but what I'm talking about is getting low behind those pads and putting that football away, you're going to see the football hit the carpet. This guy doesn't have that problem. Cons. He lacks breakaway speed, and I already talked about that. 4'5", 240 guy. So he's not the slowest guy in the world. 4'5", 2. I mean, you're not going to hear a lot of people complain about that kind of speed from the running back position, but he's not hitting home runs. Much like Frank Gore at the end of his career, we knew Frank wasn't outrunning anybody. Remember that run against Seattle? I want to say it was a year ago. And he breaks through the pile and he hits it, and you knew about 2-3 Seattle Seahawks chasing him. Frank was looking over that shoulder every chance he got, like somebody's coming to get me, right? The old Frank, the young Frank, I should say, because that was the old Frank. Old Frank knew he was getting hawked from behind. The young Frank would have smoked those boys, got to the end zone, scored a touchdown from about 70 yards out. The old Frank, that guy was looking over his shoulder like, hey man, I've been running for 55 yards, you're not gonna catch me. I'm running out of gas as we speak. So Mike Davis is much like the old Frank, the one that you had a season ago, that he's not hitting any home runs for the most part. You give this guy a scene, and that's why you got Carlos Hyde. I think Carlos Hyde can hit some home runs. Reginald Bush, we know he's a home run threat each and every single time he touches football. You got other guys who can do it. Mike Davis is going to provide something else for you, and I think him not having breakaway speed should not be a problem in San Francisco. He could improve his pass pro though. He's not a third down back, so to me, I don't want to put too much emphasis on this because you got Reginald Bush on your team. He's more of a third down back and a third down option for you, and even Carlos Hyde can function in that role as a guy that you have in on third downs that can catch it, because Carlos Hyde catches the football better than Mike Davis does, and Reginald Bush catches the football better than Mike Davis does. So you got other guys that can function as third down backs, but if he's in the game and it's a passing situation, I want to see him be a little bit better in pass protection. There are times where he stonewalls guys, but he looks really soft in pass protection. I want to see him get better at that. He dealt with some nagging injuries in 2014. 2013 was by far his best season of his collegiate career. And so as a sophomore, I thought there were really big things to come for him in his junior season. And then and this is the last con as well, so I'm going to go ahead and lump it in. Dedication. What's his dedication to the game? Are you married to the game, or is the game just your girlfriend? Is it a side piece? Is the game important to you? Is it a side piece? All right. Is the game a jump off to you? Or are you married to the game? What's your dedication? Guy shows up to spring camp overweight, okay? Shows up not in shape, ready to play football. Because of that, he does not start the season opener versus Texas A&M, and he does not eclipse 1,000 yards for the second consecutive year. And he dealt with a number of nagging injuries. Maybe they had a direct correlation to him coming in overweight. Who's to say? I can't say for sure, but I can say this much. If you're dedicated, that doesn't happen. It's not even up for discussion. How dedicated are you to football? Because guys that care about their craft, normally you hear about things like this after guys have gotten paid. He's in college and he's having issues keeping his weight under control. That's an issue for me. I don't ever want anybody questioning my dedication, and so he dealt with some nagging injuries that brought down his production in 2014. He was overweight coming into the season, had to get himself into shape. Those are problems for me. If they can rectify that, Mike Davis, to me, in the 4th round, 126th overall selection, is another double, a solid back. Don't think he's the guy that you want to be your bell cow, but you've got a stable of backs right now that you're comfortable with. Add him to the mix, and I think he'll blend in and bring some things to the table that some of the other guys do not at the running back position. You go to the final of your 4th round selections, 132nd overall pick, wide receiver out of Georgia Tech, DeAndre Smelter is the pick. Big, 6'2", 226-pound physical wide receiver. To me, he is in the mold of an Anquan Boldin, and he doesn't have the same temperament. And most guys don't. Anquan is borderline crazy, and we all know this. And so anybody that can get their jaw busted up and knocked out unconscious the way that he did, and basically show up in a week or two ready to play football, you know they're not wired correctly. And Anquan has always been crazy from day number one. He's not the guy you want to mess with on the football field. I don't think DeAndre Smelter has that in his DNA. However, he's a big physical wide receiver, much like Anquan Boldin is. Anytime you play for Georgia Tech, and again, for those of you who follow college football, you know this. I don't have to explain it to you. But for those of you who do not, if you go to Georgia Tech, much like if you go to Virginia Tech with Frank Beamer, you're going to tackle. If you go to Georgia Tech as a wide receiver, you're going to block. Georgia Tech runs the triple offense. They're known for having big, long, physical receivers who are stout at the point of attack and can block in the run game. The only way you have big runs at any level is if the wide receivers block, and at Georgia Tech, no one does it better at the wide receiver position than them. So you know he blocks in the run game. That goes without saying. He has good hands, and for a guy that isn't a football player at heart, he has really good hands, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But he's a guy that I saw many times, and let's lump these next two pros in together. With those good hands, he can extend away from his frame and high point the football. His quarterback, Thomas, at Georgia Tech, not the best thrower of the football. Now, granted, I will give this guy some credit. He was exactly what they needed at the quarterback position at Georgia Tech. Athletic, still had an arm, makes some good decisions with the football, takes care of it, which allowed Georgia Tech to be in the ACC championship game versus Florida State and almost win that football game. However, he does not always throw the best football. His footwork leaves a lot to be desired, and so a lot of his passes would sail on him, and guys like DeAndre Smelter would have to climb the ladder and go up and get the football, and this guy had no problems doing that. And so you see time and time again him leaving his feet, going and getting the football, extending away from his frame, coming down with the football. He has good hands, and he can catch away from his frame and high point the football. He consistently gets open. That's the next pro. For a guy, again, that's a little raw and has some fine tuning to do and played in a run dominant offense, so which means he didn't run the entire route tree. For a guy that, and really some of that can be chalked up to them playing in the offense that they played in at Georgia Tech, where you expect it to be a run on every single play. When it's a pass, you're surprised. He got open a lot though, and I want to give him some credit for running some good routes and setting guys up and having the athleticism to blow by some guys. Kendall Fuller, who to me is one of the best corners in all of college football at Virginia Tech. And remember, his brother is Kyle Fuller, and you'll be hearing Kendall Fuller's name in the draft coming up here in the next year or two. He's a guy that I thought DeAndre Smelter had a big day against. And when you can perform your best against the best, that says a lot about who you are as a football player. And so DeAndre Smelter for me is a guy that he's only going to get better, and I think he's really good right now. He's got upside. And here's why. Let's go to his cons. He played in a run-dominant offense. I've already explained that to you. So didn't run the entire route tree. And there are a lot of things that he hasn't been exposed to yet, wasn't privy to because of the type of offense that he played in. So there's a lot for him to still learn and grow as a wide receiver. And so that's definitely a detriment right now, but I think the upside is there because he played in the offense like he did at Georgia Tech. He's raw though. This is a guy that's an ex-baseball player. He came to Georgia Tech to play baseball, not to play football. The only reason he was playing football was because he injured his shoulder in a freak accident and was no longer a serviceable baseball player. So he turned to football, and voila, he found himself a new calling and ends up getting drafted in the fourth round of the NFL draft. So who knew you could flame out in baseball due to an injury and luck up and become a really good football player and get yourself drafted that way? But that's exactly the route that DeAndre Smelter took. Torn ACL though, this is the big problem here, and this is a staple of any Trent Baalke draft that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 seasons. Drafting and stashing football players. Here's another example of that. Tore his ACL in the season finale versus North Carolina. Of course, wasn't able to play in the bowl game, wasn't able to work out in any of the offseason activities, including the combine. Probably not going to be ready to go at all for you early in the season, maybe on the PUP list to start the season. Wouldn't be surprised if we don't see this guy at all this season. 49ers elect to keep him on the injured reserve list and stash him away and make him available next season. Probably exactly what they have in mind for him, like they did with the kid out of Clemson last year, Brandon Thomas, the guard, who tore his ACL during workouts pre-draft, and 49ers took him, stashed him away, and now he's going to be available for them this year. And they've done this quite a bit. Remember, they did it with the kid out of South Carolina, the running back as well. So this is something that Trent Baalke loves to do, get players that are damaged goods and put them away and see if they can't prove to amount to something later on after they're healthy. And so to me, if he wasn't injured, if he didn't come in as damaged goods, and the 49ers love shopping on the cheap rack. They love shopping on the discount rack. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because when you shop on the discount rack, sometimes you come away with some gems. They're hoping that he's going to provide them with that same type of dividend. In the 4th round, 132nd overall selection, wide receiver out of Georgia Tech, DeAndre Smelter for me is a double. Had he not been injured, this to me is a triple, but because of the injury, I have questions. He can't answer, therefore he is a double. You go to the 5th round, 165th overall selection, punter out of Clemson, Bradley Pinion is the selection. Now this is where I asked the 49ers, what the hell are you doing? And I was talking to a 49ers fan at the barbershop. He's a barber there, and he couldn't stand this draft, and this was one of the reasons why. In the 5th round, this is cocky on the part of the 49ers. First of all, what's wrong with Andy Lee, okay? And last time I checked, Andy Lee had a solid season, which is what Andy Lee does. Maybe you saw him as a trade piece that you could move and get more back in turn for him. Whatever, all I know is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Yeah, he's not a young pup anymore, but you don't waste 5th round selections. My thought process on specialists in general, long snappers, punters, kickers, is that you can get one in the 6th or 7th round. I don't mind you spending a 6th or 7th round pick on one of those guys, but really, priority free agency is what you do with these guys, because most likely no one else around the league is going to draft them either. And so a 5th round pick for a punter, a little too rich for my blood. I'm not a big fan of this selection, but let's talk about it quickly. 6'6", 240. What the hell is this guy eating? Bricks? I mean, damn, it seems like these punters are getting bigger and bigger every year. They're on the Sebastian Janikowski diet. I see that meal plan that he's on. 6'6", 240. God damn it, that's big. 42.6 yards per punt is his average. And we're talking net, so ball's probably traveling a little further. Guys are returning 4 or 5 yards on the return. So we're talking about a 42.6 yards per average kick. 4.1 yards of hang time is what he's providing, which is tremendous. Anything over 3.5 and you're booming it and you're keeping it in the air long enough for guys to go down and make a play and force fair catches. Speaking of which, 44% of the time he was able to force fair catches when he punted the football, so that's a big stat as well. Only 2.6% of his punts were touchbacks, so that means either you're fair catching it, we're downing it, but it's not going in the end zone very often. Nothing worse than you ending up at the, in that no man's land area, right around the 43-yard line, too far for a field goal, too close to punt the football or attempt a field goal, I should say. Really don't want to punt, but you have no choice. You got to play that field position game, and so you punt the football away, and your punter booms it into the end zone, and really it's a net of like 23 yards, which is terrible. You want them to find a way to make it either the opposing team fair catch it, or you want to make them not catch it and you down it somewhere inside the 10-yard line. He was great at not having the football go in the end zone. You go to his cons quickly. 10.7% of his kicks were down inside of the 10-yard line. I just talked about him not having the football go in the end zone for touchbacks very often, but he's not adept at having the football down inside the 10-yard line. So what that basically means is he's forcing fair catches, but he's not forcing them inside of the 10-yard line. He's not getting the football to die inside of the 10-yard line. Guys are fair catching the football at the 12-yard line, at the 15. Guys aren't catching it at the 8 or allowing it to bounce, and then it's down at the 2-yard line. Either he's a feast or famine guy is what that means. Either he's having the ball caught or downed outside of the 10-yard line, or it's going into the end zone. It's one or the other. So that's a big problem. Coughing, kicking, unpolished. Really, that goes without saying. To me, that's a lost art. You rarely see punters these days that focus on directional kicking. Really, the new trend of that is the reverse spin on the football, kicking the nose of the ball, having it hit the ground and bounce backwards with that reverse spin so that it can be down wherever it falls. So guys don't really focus in on directional kicking like they used to. It used to be an art. Now, to me, it's a lost art. And he's not weather tested. He didn't really perform in bad weather conditions, and so that's not something you know that he can do with 100% certainty. It's going to San Francisco. Who cares? How often is he going to have to deal with bad weather conditions out in San Francisco? Maybe if he goes to Seattle and it's nasty out there, good luck with that one, but whatever. In the 5th round, 165th overall selection, punter out of Clemson. Bradley Pinion for me is a single. What are we doing here in the 5th round? Are you serious? A punter? Are you kidding me? You got to be better than that, Trent Baalke. You cannot take a punter in the 5th round. Save that for the 6th round. Save that for the 7th round. Save that for an undrafted free agent acquisition. Do not spend a 1st, 5th, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round pick on a punter. Shame on you. You know better than that. You go to the 6th round, 190th overall selection. Offensive lineman out of Boston College. Ian Silberman is the pickup. 6'5", 294-pound offensive lineman. I almost stuttered saying that 294 pounds. When was the last time you seen a offensive lineman sub 300 pounds? It's almost like they don't even make those anymore. So to see a guy that's 294 pounds is alarming, but it's also refreshing as well, because really your body isn't naturally made to be 330 pounds, which is what these guys come into the league as. So to see a guy getting the job done at 295 sounds good to me, but again, you gotta adapt to your environment. He's not going to be able to survive in this league at 294 pounds. I venture to say right now, and I can't confirm nor deny this, but I'll venture to say that this guy's already north of 300 pounds already. Strong at the point of attack. He held his own at the point of attack, surprisingly enough. Here's a transfer from Florida. Didn't get the amount of snaps he was looking for at that program. Didn't like the direction they were going in. He goes to Boston College, starts a full season there, and he was stout at the point of attack. He gives a little ground, but he anchors down when it's all said and done. That's the next pro. He's one of these guys. He's here. He's getting driven back. He's getting driven back. Arch in the back. Foot sticks down in the ground. Arch that back. You're not going any further. I'm holding my ground. So he's the guy that he will give a little ground, but you're not going to bull rush him all the way to the quarterback and pressure the quarterback that way. He's a phone booth brawler. Is Ian Silberman, another one of these guys that in tight quarters is going to give you everything he's got, and really going to give you all you can ask for in the trenches. This guy not going to be someone getting to the second level and causing problems down the field, but in tight quarters and tight spaces, he's the type of player you do not want to get into it with. He's going to battle you and scrap you tooth and nail. You go to his next pro, he competes. And to me, the tape that did it for me was against USC. Boston College surprised USC early in the season when they were ranked 9th in the country. Boston College upset them, and they were able to run for over 400 yards in that game. And a large part of the reason why is they handled the big-time prospect. They ended up going 6th overall in the 2015 NFL Draft in Leonard Williams. And Ian Silverman, on some occasions, had him one-on-one. Now, he was blocking him the entire game because, as you know, Leonard Williams didn't really move around that often. He was right there in front of him all night, but he got a lot of help from the guard. And, you know, they knew where Leonard Williams was at all times. They chipped him a number of times. They double-teamed him. But there were some times where Ian Silverman, they said, hey, you want the man up by yourself. We can't help you on this one. And he did exactly that, kept Leonard Williams at bay. And I thought he really made himself a draftable football player. With just that tape alone, to me, he stood out and made himself a viable option to be drafted in the 2015 NFL Draft. You go to his cons. And here's some versatility as well. I don't want to forget that. Let me make sure I mention that as well. Here's a guy that played tackle at Boston College and at Florida, but in the NFL, I believe his size alone, I mean, we're talking about a guy that is barely 300, he's not 300 pounds yet, but I think he's already 300 pounds by now. He's probably going to be best served as a guard, and here's why. We go to his cons. Best position may be guard, and I think that is what everybody is assuming because his skill set doesn't really translate to the next level. Best at tackle, think it's more suited for guard. Here's why. He's a limited athlete. And in the next con, let's go ahead and lump that in here as well. Not fluid in space. I do not like him at the second level. He does not get there well enough for me. So to me, you're talking guard when you talk about that. A guy that you just want in a tight space at guard, holding it down, not having to move around much. Maybe use some angles to create some holes in the run game. He's going to compete. I already talked about that with this guy. He is a physical football player. He's a scrapper. He's a tough guy, but he is not an athlete, and you do not want to ask him to do some of the things that is required of an NFL caliber tackle, like move your feet laterally to keep up with some of these impressive outside linebackers and defensive ends. We know the Seattle Seahawks have a bevy of defensive linemen that can get to the quarterback. You stick a guy like Ian Silverman out on an island at tackle, he is going to struggle. So you don't want to put him in that situation. That's why guard is probably going to be his best position. In the 6th round, 190th overall selection, offensive guard out of Boston College, Ian Silverman is a double. I think he offers you some value in the way of a combo guard slash tackle. He competes a lot better than people give him credit for, and I think he's the guy that's going to earn the trust of this coaching staff with his toughness. You go to the 7th round, 244th overall selection, offensive lineman out of Florida, Trenton Brown is the selection. Here's a massive 6'8", 355-pound offensive lineman. Are you kidding me? This guy is huge. And that's an understatement. Has an NFL offensive tackle frame as the next pro. I just told you he's 6'8", 355. I mean, that smells like an NFL tackle. If it doesn't look like one to you, at least it smells like an NFL tackle to me. And so, even though he played guard at Florida, he did play offensive tackle in 2013. But in 2014, his position of choice was guard, and that's where he played on Saturdays for the Florida Gators. But I think he has an NFL tackle body, if I may say so myself. He's a physical football player. That goes without saying. You 6'8", 355, you better be physical. I know that much. You better not be soft at that size. I don't want you on my team if you are. You that big, you better be manhandling guys, which takes me to my next pro. He engulfs defenders, man. They pulled him way too much for my liking at Florida. I mean, they were pulling this guy like he was an athlete. He's not an athlete. I'll talk about that here in a second. But when he did get his hands on a guy after getting a head of steam, you don't want to get in his way. Hey, look, I'm not really a big business decision guy. You know, when guys make business decisions and get out of the way. But if I saw 6'8", 355 coming my way with about 3-4 steps of momentum coming, I'm gonna make a business decision. I'm getting the hell out of Dodge because I saw him against LSU pulling, and the outside linebacker was there one time and also a defensive end. And it was actually Daniel Hunter on one play, and he was drafted by the Minnesota Vikings in the 2015 NFL Draft, and he flattened his ass. I mean, he destroyed those guys. One time it was the outside linebacker, the other time it was the defensive end, and you don't want any part of this guy when he gets a full head of steam. Doesn't happen often because, again, he's so unathletic that you really don't have to worry about him. You can really dodge him, but those guys trying to take him head on don't know what the hell they were thinking about on those plays, as he was able to mollywop those guys. He is a physical football player that engulfs defenders when he gets a chance to. He started the point of attack. How often is it that you're going to be able to drive 6'8", 355 back into the lap of the quarterback? I'd like to see you try. I didn't see guys that were able to do so. Many tried, many failed on tape. He's a guy that is able to stand his ground at the point of attack. Versatility, he offers you some ability to play tackle as well as guard. I talked about this. I had to watch both 2014 and 2013 tape on this guy because of the fact that he played multiple positions. 2013, he was the right tackle at Florida. 2014, he was the right guard at Florida. So I needed to see both of what he was able to bring to the table so I could explain it to you, and that's what I'm about to do as we go to his cons. He is a guy that struggles to get to the second level. I already know that. And there was one play, Driscoll, the quarterback at Florida at the time, early in the season, he was running a quarterback draw, and really Trent Brown was supposed to be the lead blocker. He was pulling over from the right guard position over to the left side offensive line on a 3rd and 1. Driscoll said, to hell with it, you're too slow, you're taking too long to get there. He just lowered his shoulder and ended up getting a first down on his own. Trent Brown is not a guy you want pulling. You don't want him getting to the second level. He's not good out of space. Hard to stop and redirect 6'8", 355. Once that's going in one direction, if a guy darts in front of him and then gets out of the way, he can't stop and pick that guy up. So he's not a guy that gets to the second level. He doesn't move that well. Next con is he's a subpar athlete. That goes without saying. He's not a guy that is highly athletic. In fact, he is a subpar athlete, not going to be someone that I want moving away from the line of scrimmage at all. Really thought Florida put him at a disadvantage when they asked him to pull as many times as they did. And so this guy, not a tremendous athlete by any stretch of the imagination. And as a tackle, those two things were primarily as a guard. As a tackle, his hands are late. So he's one of these guys, he's 6'8", he's got lines for arms. His hands should be up pre-snap. As soon as the ball is snapped, he should be here. Arms extended. Like, guys shouldn't have the advantage of getting their hands on you or getting into your body at all. But I saw that too many times on tape with him as a tackle. He would not get his hands up soon enough. Guys were able to get into his chest and really displace him and get by him because he wasn't getting his hands up first. And so he has late hands as a tackle, which allows guys to get into his body and really have their way with Trenton Brown. But to me, the versatility, the size, there's got to be some kind of value here with this guy in the 7th round. Whether he makes your team or he doesn't, we know the 49ers, and this was under the Jim Harbaugh regime, so I don't know if they're going to still employ this, but we know the 49ers love to have their big formations where they would have, you know, 2 extra linemen on the field, 1 in the backfield, and they would just be moving guys all around. When they decided to run the football, it was really big time beef on the field. He's a guy that can help you in that sense as well. Put an extra offensive lineman, overload and overbalance certain sides of the formation to help you run the football effectively in short yardage situations. Trenton Brown, for me, in the 7th round, 244th overall selection, is a double. There's value here. He's a big man. You put him in conducive situations to succeed. He's a guy that can get the job done. And finally, rounding out the 49ers draft in the 7th round, 254th overall selection, tight end out of South Carolina, Rory Buster what it is right now, Buster Anderson is the pick. You go to his pros. Great size for the position. I talked about Blake Bell having some excellent size at 6'6", 252. This guy's 6'5", 244, so you're getting another tight end with the ability to do some things with some size. Cap could use all the size he can get. That's been one of the problems on this 49ers team, is not enough size, especially when you get down into the red zone. 49ers have struggled in the red zone for years. lack of size is their biggest problem when they get down there. No guys they can just throw the football up to and have them go and get it. Here's a guy that can do that for you in Rory Buster Anderson. 4'6", 40 athlete is Rory Anderson. And so Buster Anderson can run. You can pick him up, put him down. He was a mismatch at South Carolina. They did not utilize him enough. And so he was a guy that was injured toward the end of his career. Talk about that a little bit later on. But he's an athlete. He's a guy that you can get the football to out of space and have him create some yards after the catch. He's an athlete. Unlike Blake Bell, who's a 4'8", 40 guy. This is a 4'6", 5", and he may even play a little faster on game days. It's a guy that's an athlete here that you can feel comfortable filling in that Vernon Davis role. If Vernon isn't himself this year like he was last year he was a little iffy. And so if he's struggling and he's not healthy, this is a guy that could be grooming to take his place in the future. He's a route runner. I thought he ran some exceptional routes at South Carolina, was able to shake free, get open, make some plays. Really like the way he's able to undress some defenders and get open and get the football. So he's a guy that I think he'll get better with time at route running. But right now, to come in the league as a 7th round pick, I think his route running is above a lot of guys in his same position. He's a receiving threat. And even though his numbers don't really bear that out in college, he's a guy that you can throw the football to and feel comfortable with him catching the football. I think he catches the football very well. I think he's got good hands. I'm pleased with what you're getting here in the 7th round. I think this is some good value in the 7th round with Buster Anderson. And he competes as a blocker. That's the last pro. This is a guy that's not afraid to mix it up. Is he going to win all the time? No. Is it going to be pretty? No. But he's a guy that's not afraid. And look, I always say that about blocking. It's a mentality. You got to want to do it. He's a guy that wants to do it. He just needs to get better at it. Plain and simple. He needs to get better at it, but he competes as a blocker. You go to his cons. Underwhelming collegiate production. He's not a guy that's going to blow you away with the amount of catches he had throughout his career. Never had a lot of yards. Wasn't a guy that was a huge red zone target. I didn't think he got the football enough at South Carolina. So I'm thinking that if he develops at the next level, you're getting a steal in the 7th round if he can crack your roster. I've already mentioned the fact that you already have 3 tight ends on your roster. Blake Bell is going to make your football team. So that's 4. If he's not taking somebody else's spot, going to be hard for Rory Buster Anderson to crack the roster as a tight end. He's going to have to wow some people and turn some heads in training camp. He had a torn triceps last year. He tore it initially in spring ball, was not fully healthy by the time the season rolled around. He went ahead and played anyway, was able to deal with it, did leave some games, did miss 3 games because of his tricep, and then he finally tore it at the end of the season. Last game versus Georgia, tears the tricep, or not against Georgia, excuse me. He tore his triceps versus Clemson last game of the season, and so just like that, voila, guy's done, doesn't play in the bowl game, and also hurts him in the processes down the road, combine, senior bowl, all of those things. Didn't get to perform at either one of those events. And so you have a situation where he's still not ready, hasn't performed at any of the OTAs. He'll be ready for camp, however, and I think he's going to have to perform extremely well in order to have a chance to make this 49ers roster. But in the 7th round, 254th overall selection, Buster Anderson is a double to round out this 49ers draft. If you look at the 49ers and what they were able to accomplish, it's another solid draft. No home runs, 1 single with the punter, but to me, they got a lot of things accomplished. Let's see if they were able to come out as good as it seems like they were able to do. You look at their scores. You got 3 triples, which nets you a triples bonus. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 doubles, which nets you 4 doubles bonuses. And you had a single. Add all of that up, it's a 33-point draft for the 49ers. Divide by the number of picks, which were 10. You get a 3.3 triple. Not a bad draft. A lot of people were giving them a hard time for this draft. It's a consistent draft. No home runs, but this is a solid draft for the San Francisco 49ers. And so, if it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. Come back and join me as I continue to break down anything and everything in the National. There's plenty more where that came from. While you're here, subscribe to the channel if you want more Louie T, be sure to follow me on Twitter at In The Lab Room, or you can like the Facebook page at In The Lab Room. That's In The Lab Room on Facebook and at In The Lab Room on Twitter. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so.